Welcome, beautiful souls, to Her True Stories, a space created just for women like you, where real stories meet strength, resilience, and healing. Whether you come here carrying fresh wounds or scars from long ago, I want you to know this channel is your safe corner of the internet. Every story we tell here is more than entertainment. It's a reminder that you are not alone, that your voice matters, and that even the hardest chapters of your life can be rewritten with courage and grace. If you've ever been told you're too old to start over, let me tell you, that's a lie. Your story isn't over, and you still have chapters left to write. Our best-selling book, Reclaiming Your Peace After Pain, is filled with simple, powerful steps to help you heal, rebuild, and fall in love with life again. Click the link in the description box and start your new beginning today. So grab a cup of tea, take a deep breath, and settle in. You're in the right place. At Her True Stories, we don't just tell stories, we tell your stories, the ones that remind us that no matter what has been lost, peace, strength, and even joy can be found again. They say fire is both a destroyer and a purifier. But that night, standing barefoot on my front lawn while the flames devoured every corner of the house I had built with my bare hands, I didn't feel purified. I felt erased. The orange tongues licked the sky like demons set loose, smoke clawed at my throat, and I clutched the silk robe tied hastily around my waist. My neighbors stood at a distance, their faces lit by the glow, whispering as if my tragedy were a spectacle. Firefighters rushed, hoses screamed, water hissed, but it was useless. The house collapsed inward with a groan, and a piece of me collapsed with it. Inside that house were photo albums of my wedding, the dress I wore the day my son was born, the love letters from a husband long buried, and the piano I saved for years to buy. All of it gone. I wasn't just watching flames. I was watching my life be consumed. When the fire was finally out, all that remained was blackened wood, twisted metal, and smoke rising like mockery. The insurance man muttered something about investigations and delays. But none of that mattered. That night, I had no roof, no bed, no home. I turned to the one person I thought I could lean on. My son. My only son. I called him, my voice trembling as I explained. His response was silence at first, then a sigh, and finally words that would haunt me forever. Mom, I'm sorry, but there's just no room here. You know how it is, the kids, the space. We barely manage as it is. I froze. No room? His voice carried no hesitation, no ache, no love. Just calculation. Just dismissal. I begged. God help me. I begged for a moment, my dignity crushed by desperation. But his answer didn't change. So I hung up, sat in my car, and let the tears come. The leather seat beneath me was cold. The rain began to drum on the roof. That car became my shelter, my coffin of shame, the only space left for me in the world. I slept in that car for 3 nights. Each time I closed my eyes, I heard his voice again. There's no room here. I replayed every sacrifice. The nights I worked double shifts to pay for his college, the food I skipped so he could eat, the clothes I mended so he could have new ones. And this was what I got in return. On the 4th night, staring at the ceiling of that car, something inside me hardened. I realized the truth. I had been abandoned, but I wasn't powerless. I whispered to the darkness. One day, he will beg, and when he does, I'll make sure his tongue tastes ash. The fire had destroyed my house, but it had awakened something new in me. Something ruthless. Something cold. That night, the mother in me died. The avenger in me was born. My salvation came not from my son, but from my brother, Samuel. Samuel had always been my protector. As children, he'd stand in front of me when bullies circled, his fists clenched, daring anyone to touch me. When our father's temper flared, Samuel would whisk me away, whispering jokes until my tears dried. He grew into a man who built empires while I built a family. Where I chose motherhood, he chose business, and thrived. When he heard what happened, he didn't sigh or hesitate. He didn't measure his love in square footage. He came in person, his black Mercedes pulling up beside my battered old sedan, his face carved with concern. "My God, look at you," he said, pulling me into an embrace. I smelled his cologne, familiar and steady. For the first time in weeks, I felt safe. I tried to protest when he told me his plan, but he silenced me with a wave. Within a week, Samuel bought me a mansion. Not just a house, a sprawling estate with marble floors, chandeliers that dripped crystal, and gardens that sang with roses. And then, as if it were a casual gift, he placed a checkbook in my hand. "$6 million," he said. "Start over. Live again. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small." Tears threatened, but I swallowed them. I would not weep in my moment of rebirth. Instead, I straightened my back, smoothed my dress, and accepted. I transformed. With money came power, and with power came beauty. I invested in myself ruthlessly, designer gowns, silk scarves, diamond brooches that caught the light. I restored my skin with treatments, styled my silver hair into elegant waves, and carried myself like royalty. The woman my son had abandoned was gone. In her place stood a queen. But beneath the jewels and marble floors lay steel. Every smile I wore was sharpened at the edges. Every step echoed with purpose. I was no longer a mother longing for love. I was a woman preparing for war. At night, I'd sit on the balcony of my new mansion, wine glass in hand, staring out at the horizon. I thought of my son. His smug face, his rehearsed excuses. I imagined the moment he would knock on my door, flowers in hand, pretending to care. And I promised myself this. When that day came, I would not slam the door. I would not scream. No, I would let him in, pour him wine, and smile. I would make him believe he still had a place in my life. And then, slowly, methodically, I would take everything from him. My brother had given me wealth, but what I built with it would be far more valuable. A fortress of elegance, a throne of power, and a weapon forged from betrayal. The fire had reduced me to ashes. Samuel gave me the means to rise. And rise I would, not as a phoenix seeking light, but as a shadow queen, ready to make my betrayer crawl. It was a Sunday afternoon when it happened. The knock that echoed through my marble hallway like fate arriving in a cheap suit. I had been sitting in the atrium, sunlight spilling through the glass dome above, a book in one hand and a goblet of wine in the other. My staff had been dismissed for the day. I enjoyed silence, you see. Silence lets you hear the ghosts of those who wronged you. Silence sharpens your memory until betrayal sounds louder than love ever did. The knock came again, 3 times. Measured, pretending to be polite, but there was something in it. Hesitation, perhaps, or fear. I placed the book down on the carved oak table and stood slowly, deliberately. My heels clicked against the marble as I made my way to the door. And there he was. My son. He stood on my porch with a bouquet of supermarket flowers wrapped in cellophane, the kind you pick up on the way to an apology you don't mean. He wore a blazer that looked borrowed, ill-fitting at the shoulders, and his tie was loose, as though he'd knotted it in the car. His smile, oh, that smile, was rehearsed, every inch of it an act. "Mom," he said, voice trembling with fake warmth. I came to see you." I leaned against the doorframe, folding my arms. "Well, a miracle. The prodigal son returns. And with flowers, no less. Did you pick them yourself, or were they on sale?" His smile faltered, just for a moment. Then he laughed, that nervous, high-pitched laugh he used when caught off guard. "You look amazing. Really." I wasn't sure you'd even open the door. Neither was I. For a moment, we stared at each other, the silence thick as honey. I wanted him to feel the weight of it, the years of abandonment pressed into that pause. But then, I tilted my head and smiled sweetly.
Come in, darling.
His eyes widened. He hadn't expected that. He followed me inside, and I watched the greed flicker across his face as his gaze swept the mansion. His shoes squeaked on the polished floor. His fingers brushed the mahogany banister. He was casing the place, like a thief invited inside. I led him to the sitting room, where the fire crackled in the hearth though the day was warm. He sat stiffly on the velvet armchair, flowers clutched in his hands. I took them with 2 fingers, as if handling something fragile and meaningless, and placed them in a crystal vase already full of fresh roses. His cheap bouquet looked pitiful beside them. "Wine?" I asked. He nodded eagerly. I poured him a glass of Bordeaux older than his marriage, and watched him sip it too quickly, desperate to taste wealth again. We spoke, or rather he spoke. He talked about the children, their schools, how expensive everything was. He spoke of his wife, how supportive she had been through difficult times. He layered his words with praise for me, how I looked incredible, how he was glad I was back on my feet. And all the while, I sat, legs crossed, smiling, nodding but silent. Because silence is a blade sharper than words. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Mom, I wanted to say,
I'm sorry.
about before. Things were complicated and complicated." I cut in, my voice cool. "That's the word you choose?" When I was sleeping in my car. When my skin smelled of smoke and I had nowhere to go. Complicated. He shifted in his seat, eyes darting. "I didn't mean look, we didn't have space." I leaned forward. "A house with 5 bedrooms, but not enough space for your mother." His cheeks flushed. He gripped the wine glass tighter. "That's why I'm here now. I want to make things right. Family should stick together, you know?"
Ah.
There it was. The script. The line he had rehearsed in the mirror before coming. I let the silence linger again, then smiled, slow and deliberate. "Of course, darling. Families should stick together." His shoulders loosened, relief washing over him. He thought he was winning. He thought the door to his inheritance was reopening. But little did he know, I was already writing his obituary. Not of flesh, but of reputation, legacy, and name. They came back just as I knew they would. Desperation always circles back. It wears perfume, it rehearses smiles, and it knocks on your door pretending to be reconciliation. This time, my son did not come alone. His wife was with him. I saw them through the tall glass doors before they even rang the bell. She was fussing with his collar, smoothing it like a mother trying to make her boy presentable. He stood stiff, hands shoved into his pockets, shoulders hunched like a man who no longer carried confidence but debt. I let them wait. I stood just out of sight, watching their silhouettes through the etched glass, letting anticipation gnaw at them for 1 full minute before I slowly, deliberately, opened the door. "Mother," he said, smiling with that same tightness I recognized from years of his excuses. "We thought we'd drop by. Thought it would be nice." His wife stepped forward before I could respond, thrusting a gift bag toward me.
"For you," she said.
Inside was a scented candle, something generic, the kind you find stacked on clearance shelves. It still had the price tag stuck to the bottom. I smiled, gracious, and accepted it as though it were diamonds. How thoughtful. "Do come in." The masquerade had begun. The sitting room was already lit with firelight, velvet drapes drawn, and crystal decanters catching the glow. I had arranged it purposefully, the warmth of a queen's lair, intimidating yet inviting. "Please," I said, motioning to the velvet chairs by the hearth. "Make yourselves comfortable." They sat like children awaiting judgment, stiff-backed, knees too close together. My son's eyes darted around the room, landing on the chandelier, the rugs, the carved piano in the corner. His wife tried to appear composed, but her eyes betrayed her. They glittered with hunger. She was mentally inventorying every object, calculating what it might cost, what it might mean if it were someday hers. I poured drinks, a vintage port older than their marriage. I handed each crystal glass with the same smile I'd worn at board dinners when I needed to appear gracious, while planning the ruin of a rival. "How have you been?" I asked, my voice soft as silk. His wife answered before he could. "Oh, busy. The children keep us on our toes. You know how it is, school fees, activities, sports. It's a lot." She laughed lightly, too brightly, her eyes darting to me as though waiting for approval. I nodded. Yes, children can be expensive, but worth every sacrifice, don't you think? The word sacrifice lingered in the air like smoke. My son shifted in his chair. He couldn't meet my eyes. He remembered my sacrifices. He remembered the nights I skipped meals so he could eat, the second job I took so his tuition was paid. He remembered, and he was ashamed.
Good.
Shame was a useful tool. For half an hour, we danced around the truth. They asked about the house, complimented the furniture, spoke about how wonderful it was that I'd rebuilt my life so beautifully. His wife leaned forward at one point, her perfume cloying, her smile so wide it almost cracked. "You know, it's inspiring, really, to see you thriving like this after everything. Not many people could bounce back like that." Bounce back. As though I had tripped, not burned. I gave her a smile cold enough to frost glass. "Resilience is a gift, dear, but some of us earn it the hard way." Her cheeks flushed. She laughed too quickly. My son took a long sip of his port. Finally, the mask slipped. It always does. Desperation cannot stay hidden forever. My son set down his glass with a soft clink. "Mom," he began, his voice careful, rehearsed, "there's something I've been meaning to talk to you about." "Go on," I said, reclining back, folding my hands in my lap. He cleared his throat. "You know how tough things have been. The economy, my work. It's just been difficult. And, well, we've been trying to get something going. A business. Something stable for the family." His wife jumped in, nodding. "Yes, he's got such great ideas. He just needs a little support. And, of course, we wanted to come to you first. Family helps family, right?" I let the words hang. Family helps family. How sweet. How hollow. "Tell me more," I said, my tone honeyed. He launched into a clumsy pitch about real estate, investments, opportunities that would guarantee returns. His wife added details about how it could benefit everyone, how it was a chance to build something together. And all the while, I listened, smiling, nodding, sipping my wine. Inside, I was laughing. They didn't want family. They wanted funding. They wanted my wealth. They wanted the empire my brother had placed in my hands, the empire they had once abandoned me without. I thought back to the night of the fire, to my voice trembling as I begged for a place to stay, and to his cold reply, "There's no room here." Now here he was sitting in my mansion, begging me for space in my fortune. How poetic. I leaned forward, placing my hand lightly on his. His skin was clammy, his pulse quick beneath his wrist. He froze, waiting for my judgment. "Of course, darling," I said softly. "I'll consider it." The relief that washed over his face was pathetic. His wife exhaled audibly, her eyes glittering with victory. She squeezed his arm, triumphant. They thought the gates of Eden had opened. They thought they were walking back into my favor. What they didn't realize was that I had just tightened the noose. Over the weeks that followed, I played my role flawlessly. I invited them to dinner, to tea, to garden luncheons under the roses. I dressed in silks, diamonds glinting at my wrists, my hair styled like a queen's crown. I laughed at their jokes, praised their children, even handed out small gifts of money now and then. Not enough to save them, but enough to make them come crawling back for more. Each time, their gratitude grew thinner. Each time, their entitlement sharpened. Just a little more, they'd say. We're almost there. This is the last time, promise. I smiled. I nodded. I handed over just enough. And inside, I marked another tally on the invisible ledger of their debt to me. At night, when the house was silent, I would sit at my writing desk with a single lamp burning. I would open the leather-bound journal I kept hidden in a drawer, and I would write. I wrote every detail, every request, every lie, every flicker of greed in their eyes. I wrote the exact words he used, the way his wife's hands trembled when she thought I might say no, the way his voice cracked when he spoke of opportunities. And beneath every entry, I wrote the same line. He thinks he's winning. The journal wasn't for memory. It was for savoring, because revenge is not a meal to be devoured. It is a feast to be prepared slowly, each ingredient chosen with care. One evening, after yet another dinner where they circled around the subject of investments, I stood at the balcony of my mansion, wine glass in hand, looking out over the gardens. The moon hung low, casting silver light on the roses. The air smelled of night-blooming jasmine. Behind me, the house glowed with wealth, every corner a testament to resilience. And I whispered into the night, "Yes, I'll help you. I'll help you dig your grave, inch by inch, until you're buried alive by your own greed." The masquerade was working. They believed I had forgiven. They believed I was once again the mother who would sacrifice everything for her son. But forgiveness was not in me. Not anymore. I had given him life. He had given me ashes. And so I would give him what he gave me. Slowly, ruthlessly, until his world turned to ash in his hands. They came to me often after that first evening, as I knew they would. You see, desperation is like a scent. It clings to people. You can smell it before they even open their mouths. My son and his wife wore it like a second skin, and each time they crossed the threshold of my mansion, I knew what they had come for. The first time, I gave them $5,000. A trivial sum to me, but to them it was salvation. They sat on my velvet sofa, fingers trembling as they accepted the envelope, eyes darting between each other like two children caught stealing. "Oh, Mom, thank you," my son whispered. He said the words, but I heard no sincerity in his tone. Gratitude wasn't in his voice, it was hunger. His wife leaned into him, her manicured nails tightening over his hand, her smile triumphant, as though she had won a prize. I leaned back in my chair, watching them with a serene smile. "It's not much," I said softly, "but it might help." It was enough. Not to save them, of course, but to make them believe. And that is the most powerful weapon, belief. Once they believed I was on their side, once they believed I was once again their provider, I owned them. The next time they came, the desperation was heavier. He wore it in the slump of his shoulders, in the way his tie was loosened before he even entered the door. She wore it in her smile, wider than before, desperate to charm. "I don't mean to impose," he said, his voice dripping with practiced humility. "But things are moving faster than expected. Opportunities don't wait. If we just had a little more up front." I raised an eyebrow, lifting my glass of Bordeaux. "A little more?" "10,000, he said quickly, almost before I had finished speaking. Then, as though it were a sacred offering, he added, "I'll pay you back. With interest." Interest. The word nearly made me laugh out loud. My son, who had let me rot in a car when I needed shelter, now promised me interest. I folded my hands delicately in my lap and gave him the same smile I had given lawyers and politicians in boardrooms when I knew I already owned them. "Of course," I murmured. "Family helps family." His wife's relief was so great that she exhaled visibly, her shoulders dropping, her painted lips parting in gratitude. "You won't regret this," she said quickly. "We're so close. This will make all the difference." I tilted my head. "I'm sure it will." Inside, I was laughing. From that day, the visits came like clockwork. Sometimes he came alone, sometimes with his wife, and sometimes, most insultingly, they brought my grandchildren. They ran through the marble halls of my home with sticky fingers, leaving fingerprints on crystal, tugging at silk drapes, laughing as though this mansion was theirs. Their mother would call after them sharply, "Say thank you to Grandma," her tone more command than encouragement. "Thank you, Grandma." They would chorus, their young voices high and sweet. But their eyes, I noticed, flicked not to me but to their father, watching him, imitating him. Already, they were learning his hunger. Already, they were learning that gratitude is a performance, not a truth. I smiled at them. I knelt to their level, smoothed their hair, and whispered softly when no one was listening, "Remember this house. Remember who opened the door for you and who didn't. Children are witnesses, and witnesses grow into judges. One day, they would know who had loved them and who had abandoned me, and I would not let them forget." Soon his wife began calling me directly. Her voice would drop into a false intimacy, as though we were conspirators. "Just between us women," she said once, "I think this business will turn everything around. It's not just for us. It's for the children. You wouldn't want them to suffer, would you?" I listened patiently. I let her think she was persuasive. But in my mind, I was writing in my journal, "She appeals to me through the children, but it is not for them. It is for her dresses, her jewelry, her empty vanity. She does not beg for their survival. She begs for her lifestyle." The pattern revealed itself with precision. Each time I gave, their gratitude thinned, their entitlement grew sharper.
"Just a little more," they said.
"We're almost there. This is the last time, promise." I gave enough to keep them crawling, but never enough to save them. I fed their hunger until it consumed them. Parasites, after all, cannot stop feeding. And once they cannot stop, they are mine. One evening, as they sat across from me in the drawing room, their voices rising with the desperation of another pitch for money, I set my glass down and smiled. The firelight flickered, casting shadows on the velvet drapes. "Darling," I said, my voice silk over steel, "of course I'll help. But only if you prove your loyalty." They both froze. His wife glanced at him, alarm flashing in her eyes. "Loyalty," she repeated. "Yes," I said, my smile widening. "If I am to invest in you, then I must know that your loyalty to me is unshakable. Do that, and you'll never have to worry about money again." Their relief was immediate. They nodded eagerly, agreeing before they even knew what loyalty might mean. And that was when I knew I had them completely. They were mine now, caught in the silken web I had woven. The masquerade was no longer just working, it was thriving. Wealth is not about what you have. It is about what you deny others. That was the lesson my son had forgotten. While he thought he was winning me back, I was building my empire in silence. My brother had given me the tools, but I wielded them with precision. The lawyers came first. We met in private rooms of restaurants too expensive for gossip to leak. They arrived in suits tailored so sharply they could cut glass, and they listened to me with the reverence of men who knew money when it spoke. "I want everything restructured," I told them. "Every asset, every account, every will. Nothing must remain as it was." One of them adjusted his glasses. "Are you disinheriting him completely?" I swirled my glass of wine, watching the ruby liquid catch the light. "I'm not disinheriting," I said. "I'm erasing." They understood. Within weeks, My fortune was hidden in trusts and foundations so deep he would never untangle them. My mansion, my accounts, even the jewelry on my fingers, none of it bore his name anymore. He could come begging, but there would be nothing for him to claim. While the lawyers worked, I cultivated my image. I attended galas, sat in the front rows of charity dinners, posed for photographs with senators and business magnates. My name appeared in the society pages, my face in glossy magazines. I became untouchable, an icon of resilience.
And my son saw it.
I saw it in his eyes every time he visited. The bitterness, the envy, the realization that I had risen higher without him than I ever had with him. "Mom, you're everywhere these days," he said once, his voice tight, his smile forced. "Yes," I replied, lifting my champagne. "Some of us know how to rise." But I did more than rise. I quietly destroyed him. Rumors began to spread, rumors I had planted carefully, whispers placed in the right ears. He's in debt. His business is failing. His wife had to pawn her jewelry. Soon, doors closed on him. Contracts evaporated. Invitations disappeared. The man who had thought he could inherit my empire could not even keep his own afloat. His wife began to break. One afternoon, she cornered me in the hallway of my mansion, her voice trembling. "We're drowning," she confessed. "Please just give us something more. You don't know what it's like." I turned slowly, my gaze steady on hers. "No," I said, my voice sharp as glass. "You don't know what it's like. To sleep in a car while your son says there's no room. To beg and hear silence. To be forgotten. You don't know, but you will." She paled, her lips parting without words. She did not speak again that evening. I wrote in my journal that night. Parasite fully dependent. Wife cracking under pressure. Children see fragments of truth. Estate secured. Reputation rising. He believes he is gaining a mother. In truth, he is losing his world. On the evening of his 6th visit, I placed a thick envelope on the table. He reached for it eagerly, his hand trembling. Before his fingers touched it, I pressed my hand down on top of it. Our eyes met. His froze under the weight of mine. "Listen carefully," I said, my tone a blade sliding between ribs. "What you think is yours will never be yours. Not now. Not ever. And one day soon, you will understand that everything you've built is standing on sand." His hand stilled beneath mine. His wife inhaled sharply. Then, slowly, I lifted my hand and let him take the envelope. I smiled as he did, the smile of a queen granting a condemned man his last meal. Because the masquerade was almost over. And when it ended, it would end with ruin. The day came sooner than I had expected. Perhaps it was inevitable. Greed always grows too fast, choking everything around it until there is nothing left but rot. And when rot sets in, you cut it out. You cut deep, without hesitation, without mercy. It was a Friday evening when I summoned him. I used the word summon because that was what it was. He came when I called. My son, once so sure of his independence, once so proud to remind me he had no room for me, now came like a servant, as though the pulse of his life beat to the rhythm of my invitations. He arrived with his wife, of course. She clung to him as though the fabric of her dress was the only thing holding her together. Her eyes darted around my foyer, searching for clues, for hints, for signs of what I might say, what I might give. She was hungry, but not for me, only for what I carried. I led them into the study, the room I had designed for moments like this. Dark mahogany shelves lined with leather-bound books, a heavy desk at the center, the faint scent of cigar smoke woven into the air though I hadn't smoked in years. It was a room of judgment, a room where men had signed deals, confessed sins, and lost kingdoms. Tonight, it would witness the dissection of a son.
Sit, I said.
My voice was not loud, but it didn't need to be. Authority doesn't shout. It whispers, and the world leans closer. They sat opposite me. I didn't pour wine this time.
No hospitality. No pretense.
Only truth. I've been thinking, I began, steepling my fingers beneath my chin, about the future, about legacy. His wife's eyes lit up. My son straightened in his chair, hope flickering across his face like a flame desperate for oxygen. You know, I continued, my voice smooth as glass, when one has wealth, true wealth, the question of inheritance is never far away. The words hit him like a drug. His breath quickened. His hands clenched on the armrests. I watched the hope surge inside him, filling his veins, making him bold enough to imagine. Yes, Mom, he said quickly. Of course. We've been thinking about that too, about the future, about building something that lasts. I raised a hand, silencing him. You misunderstand. When I speak of inheritance, I do not mean passing down what is mine. I mean deciding who is worthy of it at all. Silence. A thick, suffocating silence that wrapped around us like smoke. His wife's smile faltered. My son blinked, confusion twisting into unease. What do you mean? He asked slowly. I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto his. I mean this. I have rewritten my will. Every account, every property, every piece of art, every diamond, it is no longer yours to expect. You are not my heir. You are nothing. The words sliced through the air, sharper than any blade. His face went pale. His wife gasped audibly, her hand flying to her mouth. The hope that had lit his eyes only moments ago shattered, leaving behind something raw, something ugly. You can't, he stammered. You're my mother. It's my right. Your right? I hissed, my voice dropping to ice. Did I have a right to a roof when I was sleeping in my car? Did I have a right to compassion when you turned me away with nothing but excuses? Tell me, where was my right then? He flinched, his lips opening, closing, searching for words. His wife tried to intervene, her voice shaking. It was complicated. I slammed my hand down on the desk, the sound reverberating through the study. Do not speak to me of complicated. You watched me burn, you watched me beg, and you let me rot. And now you think you can smile, bring flowers, sip my wine, and inherit my empire?
No.
You are not my heir. You are my failure. The silence that followed was deafening. I sat back, smoothing the sleeve of my silk blouse, regaining the calm that had momentarily cracked. You will leave here tonight knowing the truth, I said softly. My fortune will go to those who understand loyalty, to charity, to foundations, to those who stood beside me when I was broken. Even my housekeeper has more claim to my empire than you. His face crumbled, red blotches blooming across his cheeks. His wife's eyes burned with rage, but she said nothing. Perhaps she understood, at last, that her schemes had met a wall she could not climb. My son leaned forward, his voice trembling with fury. You can't do this to me. I smiled, cold and beautiful. I already have. Revenge is never complete until it is witnessed. Quiet vengeance may satisfy the heart, but public humiliation? That is the feast that lingers, the one that burns long after the taste has faded. After the night in the study, my son stopped visiting for a time. Shame will do that. It burrows into the skin, festers, makes every reflection in the mirror unbearable. But hunger always returns, and with it, so did he. What he didn't realize was that I had already begun the second stage of his unraveling. It started with whispers. I never needed to lie. The truth was damning enough. All it took was one phone call, one casual comment at a gala, one raised eyebrow at a charity dinner. Such a shame, I murmured once over champagne. He's been struggling with debts. I left it at that. Whispers grow legs faster than gossip ever needs to. Within weeks, doors began closing on him. Clients pulled away. Business partners stopped returning calls. The golf club where he preened and paraded suddenly claimed his membership fees were overdue. Even the smug little circle his wife adored began to cool, invitations arriving later and later until they stopped altogether. He came to me, rage burning in his eyes. "You've been talking about me," he accused. I tilted my head, feigning innocence.
People talk, darling.
Perhaps they've seen the truth without me saying a word. He slammed his fist on the table. "You're ruining me." I leaned in, my lips curving into a smile sharp enough to cut. "No, my son. You ruined yourself. I'm simply holding up the mirror." His downfall spread like wildfire. His debts became public knowledge, creditors circling like vultures. His wife's jewelry disappeared piece by piece, pawned for pennies compared to its worth. And then, the ultimate fracture. She filed for separation. Oh, how glorious it was. I heard the news from a friend before he had the courage to tell me. She had grown tired of the humiliation, tired of the whispers that trailed behind them like shadows. She had married for wealth, and when it evaporated, so did her loyalty. Parasites, after all, abandoned corpses. When he finally arrived at my gates, he was a husk. His suit hung loose on him, his eyes bloodshot, his voice hoarse. He begged. For the first time in his life, he knelt on my marble steps, his hands pressed together, his words tumbling over themselves.
"Mom, please. Please. I'll do anything.
Just help me. I'm your son. I'm your blood." I stood above him, my staff watching from the shadows. I let him kneel. I let him beg. I let him feel the weight of every night I had spent in my car while he shut his door to me. And then, when his voice cracked into sobs, I stepped closer and whispered, so only he could hear, "Ashes don't forgive." I turned and walked inside. Behind me, my security dragged him from the steps like a trespasser, his cries echoing against the iron gates. That night, as I sat in my study, the firelight dancing against the walls, I poured myself a glass of wine and opened my journal. The parasite has been exposed. His world has collapsed. His wife has left. His name is Mud. And still, he crawls, begging for scraps. There is no satisfaction in reconciliation, only in ruin. And I will not stop until the world forgets his name. Because revenge is not finished until the world sees what you have seen, until the one who betrayed you has nowhere left to hide, until their shadow itself becomes ashamed of following them. And my son's shadow had just begun to wither. It was raining the night he returned. Not the kind of gentle rain that nourishes the earth, but the kind that falls in sheets, punishing, relentless, the kind that soaks through to your bones and makes you feel small beneath the sky. I heard the knock long before the butler came to tell me. 3 loud, desperate bangs against the iron gates that guarded my estate. "Madam," the butler said carefully, his voice even, "he's here." Of course he was. Parasites always return to the body they once drained, even when it is no longer theirs. I rose from my armchair, smoothing the silk of my gown, and walked slowly to the window. From the second-floor landing, I could see him, a lone figure drenched in the downpour, hair plastered to his forehead, clothes clinging to him like rags. He no longer resembled the man who had once looked at me with contempt, the son who had turned me away with such casual cruelty. He looked like a beggar. He looked like what he was. I descended the staircase with the deliberate grace of a queen. When I reached the front hall, I signaled for the gates to be opened. Let him come. Let him crawl one last time. He stumbled inside, clutching a bouquet of wilted flowers that looked as though he had plucked them from the roadside. His knees buckled on the marble floor of my entryway, and before I could speak, his voice tore through the silence. "Mom, please." His words cracked, shredded by sobs. Please, I have nothing left. No one. The bank has taken the house.
She's gone.
The kids. His voice broke entirely, collapsing into a cry that was half scream, half surrender. I let him kneel. I let him soak the marble with rain and tears. I let the staff watch from the shadows, their eyes wide, because humiliation tastes sweeter when it is witnessed. I have nothing, he whispered again, his forehead pressed to the floor. Please help me. I'll do anything. Anything. I stepped closer, my heels clicking against the stone. For a moment, I simply looked down at him. My son. My blood. The boy I had once held in my arms. The man who had turned me away when fire consumed my life. And now he was here, a husk of himself, begging for the mercy he had never given. Anything? I asked softly, my voice sharp enough to slice through his sobs. Yes, he gasped, his voice rising in desperation. Anything you want. Just don't leave me like this. I tilted my head, studying him. Do you remember the night I called you after the fire? He froze. Slowly, he lifted his head, his eyes red, his face streaked with water. Yes, he whispered. Do you remember what you said? His lips trembled. I said there was no room. There was no room, I repeated, savoring the words like venom. 5 bedrooms, but no room for your mother. And now look at you. No wife. No home.
No dignity.
Tell me, son, do you think there is room for you here? He collapsed again, his forehead striking the marble.
Please.
I'll die out there. Please don't turn me away. I crouched down, my face level with his, and whispered so quietly only he could hear. Ashes don't forgive. Then I rose, turned my back on him, and walked away. Escort him out, I told the butler, my voice calm measured. Do not let him near the gates again. As the doors closed behind him, I heard his screams echo against the iron. The rain drowned them, carried them into the night. That evening, I sat at my desk, opened my journal, and wrote. He begged.
He wept.
He crawled. But ashes remember. And ashes do not forgive. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet that feels earned. The kind that only comes when you have burned away the noise of betrayal, the chaos of begging voices, the weight of undeserved ties. I sat in my study, the fire crackling low in the hearth, a glass of wine in my hand. My mansion glowed around me, each chandelier and velvet drape a reminder of what had been restored, of what had been rebuilt. On the desk before me lay a single framed photograph. Not of my son, not of his children, not of the life I had once begged to preserve. No, this photograph was of my burned-down house, its skeletal remains captured by a neighbor in the days after the fire. Blackened beams, collapsed walls, smoke rising into the sky like a prayer unanswered. I kept it here not as a wound, but as a weapon. A reminder of what he had done, of who I had become. He had come back as I always knew he would. He had begged, and I had denied him. He had wept, and I had turned away. Some may call it cruel. Some may call it merciless. But I call it justice. A mother may forgive many things, but not abandonment, not betrayal. I had cut him out of everything. My wealth, my legacy, my empire, it would never bear his name. His children, perhaps, would one day inherit fragments, not as his lineage, but as mine. They would know that loyalty is rewarded and betrayal is punished. They would know that their grandmother built her throne from ashes and that their father had burned himself to nothing. I took a slow sip of wine, the taste rich, bold, heavy on my tongue. Revenge is not sweet, not the way stories make it seem. It is not fireworks, it is not music swelling as the credits roll. It is cold, it is heavy, it is final, but in its weight, there is peace. Because I had done what needed to be done. I had erased the rot. I had burned away the parasite. I had proven that ashes may be silent, but they do not forget. I closed my journal for the last time. The leather cover, worn from nights of confession, snapped shut with a soft finality. I placed it in the drawer, locked it, and turned the key. As the fire crackled low, I whispered into the room, into the silence that had become my companion. I gave him life. He gave me ashes, and I returned the favor. I am his mother no more. I am his reckoning. And with that, I leaned back in my chair, the queen of a silent empire, alone but unbroken, crowned not with gold, but with the satisfaction of ruin. Beautiful souls, if this story spoke to something deep within you, if it reminded you of betrayal, of wounds that still ache, of nights you thought you wouldn't survive, then hear me clearly. You are not alone. At Her True Stories, we tell stories not just to shock or entertain, but to remind you of your own strength, your own resilience, your own power to rise even from ashes. And if you are ready to take that next step for yourself, to stop living in the shadows of pain and start reclaiming your peace, then I want to invite you to grab a copy of our best-selling book, Reclaiming Your Peace After Pain. Inside its pages, you'll find simple, powerful steps to heal, to rebuild, and to write new chapters filled with strength, clarity, and even joy. The link is in the description box below. Don't wait. Your new beginning starts today. And before you go, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss a story that reminds you of your own strength. Hit that like button if today's story resonated with you, and share it with someone who needs to hear that survival is possible, that revenge can be quiet and dignified, and that healing is always within reach. Because here, at Her True Stories, we don't just tell stories. We tell your stories. The ones that remind us that even when the world burns around us, there is always room to rise from the ashes.